IcePanel is basically like Microsoft Visio, but on steroids. It allows you to create these layered diagrams that is known as C4 modeling. And that is what makes this software so unique, is the layering of the flowchart. You can zoom in and out of the processes that you make and then collaborate on them with your team. So in this video, we're gonna be talking about the building blocks of IcePanel, and then we're gonna be going into flows, which you can create in IcePanel as well. And then finally go over a couple competitors to see if this software is right for you or if you wanna switch to another software. When you first log into IcePanel and go through verifying your email and all that jazz, it's gonna look something like this in a workspace. So this is a domain. So you get one domain on the free plan, and then you can pay to have additional domains. We'll go over pricing in a little bit. But here you have one domain and you work within this domain, and you can make systems, you can make spaces, areas, all these things. So this is an example. I like to look at an example before I kind of show you how to actually go about and build this. So what we have here is, this is your domain, and you can zoom in and out and build it as crazy as you want. So for our example, we're doing a SheCodes invoice process, which I tried to use in Microsoft Visio or Draw.io, but I was really struggling because I liked the layeredness of this diagram and the fact that you can draw arrows and it doesn't look as messy as one of those diagrams looks. And you can add little apps. So I have Liz, which is me, and then I have these arrows kind of going all about crazy. What you can do is you can build actors, which Liz, I'm an actor, and then SheCodes is an actor. So people, right, are the actors. The systems are gonna be a high level system, okay? So you can, when you pick a system, you can pick a app here and scroll through these apps. Like Gmail would be a system. You don't always have to have an app, right? But if you're using a specific technology to make the app, you can click it as well. You can also pick pre-made, like the low-code tools like Asana or some of these other ones, but you can scroll through here and see what they're considering as a system, and then click in here and just pick one. You can even have Microsoft Excel as a system if you're using Excel spreadsheets, stuff like that. So this is what it looks like. You have all these systems, and then you have actors. You can also add areas, which kind of encompass maybe two different systems or a person or whatever. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that because I don't need that area, but just keep that in mind. If you wanna group things together, you can do an area. So that's the first layer, right? You can create more diagrams of the same layer. You're at the first layer of the C4 modeling. When you go a layer deeper, so let's click inside QuickBooks, you're in the QuickBooks area, so we can call this QuickBooks, right? QuickBooks diagram. Now you'll notice that now you have two more options. You have apps and stores. So now you can click, if you have a database in here, you can click a store and drag it in there and then name it like database, right? And if you want to use a specific technology, like let's say like SQL, you can click that as well. You can click you can say, oh, I'm using an Azure SQL database. So it's very cool, especially if you're developing apps. Now for my example, this is a business example. I don't need to go into like the data structure of QuickBooks, but it is nice to know that I am using invoices and then I'm pulling it there. So I can see a level deeper. So that's one more level. If I go even deeper, you'll get one more option, which is a component. So you can drag and drop there. So that's where it forces you. It forces you to put it within these layers, so you can only go so far down. I think if you pay to upgrade, you can make more layers, but I'm unsure about that because I don't have the paid version yet. So if we go all the way back, you can zoom out all the way back to the original diagram and see what it looks like. But if you wanted to just show it as SheCodes, you could just make a new diagram, call it a SheCodes diagram, and use all the same actors. So I can go into model objects here and type in SheCodes and pull them in and make a different diagram, but focus more on what they're seeing. So I can pull in the SheCodes dashboard, right? And I can pull in these objects and then kind of interact them together to make a different diagram. So a higher level diagram, say this is what SheCodes would see. Or what I like to do at work is to make a manager view. Like my manager may not want to see the guts and the sequel of all the things, but they want to see an overarching view. So sometimes I'll do this for a particular person. So that's an option as well. I really like that feature, so you can feel free to delete the diagram, but it's always an option. It's going to be the same actors, but you can show it slightly differently depending on who's looking at it. The other cool thing that I like is once you have you made your model objects, you can pull them in. So let's say I want to pull that mailbox into this view. So let's say for some reason I wanted to see my Gmail mailbox in this view. You can go in here and search mailbox, pull it in, drag and drop, and then it shows it outlined here. And you can have these interact. So it's really cool that this kind of pulls it in with the layer as well and shows like a deeper view of it. And then if you don't like that, you can just delete it. So there's lots of different options. The other thing I wanted to show you is you can actually do note taking within each system. So if I wanted to make a note, I can add a note here, or I can link it somewhere outside. So I can add an external link. So keep that in mind. You can also add tags. So if I wanted to tag this as live or future or whatever, you can make new groups or tag it as people, and then you can hide those tags. So down here, you can say, okay, if it's showing future, then I can unshow this guy. So I can hide any ones that say future or show or whatever. So you can filter through. I don't have any tagged as future, but to show you, I guess I could go in here and let me add future on here, and we can add future on here. This is gonna make no sense, but it's just to show you how this thing works, and I can hide those. And then bam, it simplifies the diagram. So if I unhide those, you can see them. So that's sometimes fun, and then you can press this down arrow to push that down so you don't see the colors. So that's something you can do as well. The other thing I like to do is, so if I go to my newsletter one, I could actually link to a documentation of my newsletter. So this would be a separate domain, but I just have it in a separate diagram. But what I would do is I would link it to a third-party service like Scribe. So for my newsletter, I actually have a documentation in Scribe, which I can link here. So I can press add link, generic link, paste it in there, and then say newsletter documentation. Press add link, and then when someone comes in here, they can actually look and say, okay, she's creating a newsletter in Ghost. Okay, click this link, and it takes you to a newsletter SOP. And this was the original flowchart. So I originally made this flowchart in, I think, Lucidchart, which I like. It's a good software, but it doesn't have that layering. And then in here you can see, okay, how do I log in? This is how I log in. Okay, how do I create a content? How do I schedule a post? Go in here, and it's like, it'll give you more information beyond the architecture. So think of IcePanel as like the architecture of how you're building your systems, and then you can link externally to a SharePoint site or to Scribe or to other documentation or notes, but it's like all encompassing within this one software. Okay, so how do we actually build this thing? So what you need to do is you need to pull in objects. So if I were building an app, for example, so I'm gonna say building an app, I would pull in an actor, let's say it's a customer, right? And then I would pull in a system and say my app, right? And then you would press one level deeper and you'd say, okay, you know what? I actually have a front end system, and then I have the back end, right? And then this is more for developers. So my examples were more for business people, but this would be for a developer. And then you would say, you know what, my front end, I'm using Angular, right? That's the front end application that I'm using. And let's say my back end is a SQL database. There we go. Let's say it's an Azure SQL database to be even fancier. And then now you can start building out the infrastructure and saying, look, I'm pulling this using Azure Data Factories, and it's going from here to here, or however you want to start building. But then you start building out your system, and then when you give this to a developer, they can easily get on board and be like, okay, I get it. They're using SQL databases for their backend, their front end's in Angular. You could link to your GitHub for your code using the link here. You can start really building this stuff out, which is something that I really like as well, is for data architecture, which is really nice. So you can start using it for Microsoft Visio, like system processes, or you can use it to develop your entire architecture of your applications that you create at work. Once you have that, you can start adding these little arrows. So you basically just hover over your customer here, click and drag into here, and then it says new connection. And you can start adding new connections and saying customer opens app, for example. And then what's nice is you can flip the direction, you can add little notes on your customer, whatever you want to do. The other cool thing is you actually can delete this and build them from one layer deeper. So this is how I usually do it, is I go into my app and I drag in my customer that I've already made. So you go to model objects, you don't need to make the customer again. Go to model objects, drag it in here, and let's say they're interacting with the front end. So let's say customer opens app, right? Same thing, customer opens app. But let's say you wanted to show it on the high level, you could zoom back out. So we're gonna go back to the first level, to building an app. And now if I drag and drop that here, it says implied connection. So I can just click that and pull it up from the other layers. And when it says implied, that means the connection was built lower or deeper in the model, and you can pull it up. So what I like to do is actually go to the farthest, deepest layer I can go, and then I pull the connections up as I need them. So that's a little tip if you like to if you like to build everything out in the super layers and then pull it up. One of my favorite features is actually the flows feature. So in this kind of messy diagram, what you can do to make it simple is to make these things called flows. They're in the bottom left-hand corner here. So if I click flows and I click invoice sheet codes, so this is when Liz wants to invoice sheet codes. I click this, you can create these cool steps where, see how it has a 1 now, and then you can press next, and then you have a 2, and then next has a 3, next, you get the point. It highlights it every single time. So you can go back, you can go forward, it's really cool. If you wanted to add a step, you can basically click plus step and then search for the connection, and that's your step. Super easy to use. You can create many different flows, so then you can have each person on your team has a different flow. And that's really nice because it's something that Microsoft Visio and Draw.io and some of the other applications don't have, is they can't highlight. It's not as interactive, right? Like once you have Microsoft Visio, it's basically like a picture. It's not a very interactive process. Okay, so your main competitors are gonna be Microsoft Visio and Lucidchart. Those are the ones that I hear about the most. If you're at a Microsoft company with a Microsoft platform, you're probably gonna be using Microsoft Visio, which I don't, unless you're paying for the paid version, it's not fantastic. I did a full review on it. I do think it's great if you have something very simple. If you have a simple flow, then IcePanel's an overkill, okay? You don't need it. But if you have a more complicated kind of system and there's apps involved and you're custom making apps, you're working with developers, IcePanel's super awesome. You just send a link and easy peasy. So here you have Microsoft Visio. Again, it's like super basic. You're talking about blocks and arrows, okay? Nothing crazy. Same thing with Lucidchart. It's got a little bit more features, a little bit more shebang here. You can do some conditional formatting and stuff like that. But again, use these for simple processes. This is an overkill for a simple process. This clearly is not a simple process. There's lots of moving parts and pieces. This is really great for using IcePanel. And then also if you're building an app and you're working with front-end developers, back-end developers, and you build an API or you're using APIs, this is really great because you can start seeing, okay, my backend, where is it pulling from, And then people who are onboarded are like, oh, I understand, this is like normal data language, right? Data architecture. People draw this on the whiteboard, but then it goes nowhere. So this is great for development, but if you have super basic stuff, I would say Microsoft Visio and Lucidchart are your best bet. Now, I hope this gives you an idea of what this software would be used for. I do think it's a huge game changer. I will not be switching back to small diagrams unless they're super simple processes. But for the most part, I'm sticking with IcePanel and I'm linking it to Scribe. If you want to see a video review on Scribe, I pay for the pro version every year. It's like $300. So I will link that up here. I will also link Innatin and a couple other software review videos that I think you might be interested in if you're checking out kind of cool and upcoming software. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time.